Oh my goodness, it's beautiful out on this FAQ Friday. I just stepped outside for the first time, and all of that rain, I guess, brought in a cool front because it is absolutely wonderful out. Hopefully, the mosquitoes will cooperate in kind and not bother me as I answer some questions for FAQ Friday. So, number one, a lot of you have asked about this Euonymus. This is a gold fortuny, just regular old Euonymus that's in this pot. It's been here forever, and it is about as low maintenance as you can get. In fact, this one in particular hasn't ever even had scale or any problems whatsoever. I water it, I sometimes feed it, I definitely don't bring it in the winter time, but that's all it is. And someone commented that they like it in this pot, but they don't like it in the ground, and I would have to kind of concur. I think it makes a great pot specimen, but I don't always like it in the ground. And I've got another one over there. It's leaning a bit after the storm, but that I transformed into a topiary form. And no, I haven't had my pretty pillows out for a while since it's been so rainy. These, I'll answer this question again because it's very, very common in the comment stream, and that's, what are these two topiaries and do I bring them in? And no, they are Green Mountain Boxwood topiaries. I've had them for years, and they are so heavy that there is no way I could bring them into the greenhouse, and they overwinter just fine. If you are in a colder zone, I'm in 7A, if you are in a 6 or lower zone, then I would just, I guess, advise you to consult with some experts in your area as to whether or not they would overwinter in a pot. If these were smaller, even in my zone, that might be problematic, but because they are so large and it's almost like they're growing in the ground in these very, very massive pots, then it's not an issue. Smaller pots of boxwood I do protect, and I have done, if you go back into my YouTube channels, YouTube videos rather, there is an episode, I think for a Southern Living video that I did on how I overwinter my smaller plants. Now this is one of the top questions. What kind of grass do I have? Well, I've answered it many times, but let me respond again. This is a very high quality, highly realistic synthetic turf. In fact, if you were standing on it, you would have to touch it to be able to tell that it was not real. And even then, some people question whether or not it is artificial turf. And these leaves that are on it right now, I just blow off with a blower. And I use a Litheli Blower. I'll put a link below. I use a Litheli Blower. If you need something, a blower that is a lot lighter, if you have arthritis or you want something not so powerful, I use a WORX Blower. That's WORX. And I'll try to put a link to that below as well. So this company is called NextGen, N-E-X-G-E-N. It's a nationwide company. I have had this since 2014, and if you have subscribed to LVTV, be on the lookout for a very long interview I did for the guy who introduced me to this and who did the installation, which is just fascinating. And he talked at great length about expense, about different kinds of options for you, who would make a good candidate for artificial turf, every consideration. We did an in-depth interview into every question you might have about it. And I will put a link to LVTV to subscribe below. We launch tomorrow. I'm kind of nervous. If you are not on LVTV, then go to lindavotter.com, and I wrote an extensive blog post about it there. and I show pictures of its installation and answer a lot of questions and address considerations you may have before installing artificial turf. And definitely all artificial turf is not equal. So there's the answer to that question. So many of you have asked where I get all of my pots, and I'll answer it again. I get them anywhere and everywhere. I get them from garden centers, estate sales, hand-me-downs, Goodwill, just about anywhere. And I just try to make them look the way I want them to look. Which leads me to the next question. Why do I have so many pots? I think I have talked quite a bit about all the pots that I have and how I like to style them, but I haven't maybe spoken directly to why I have so many pots. Well, I have them because, first of all, I like the look. If you're on Instagram, there are a number of Scandinavian accounts that add complexity and interest to the garden by staging lots of pots congregated together. So I like that look, and I have a small garden, and there are things that I want to grow that I don't have space for in the ground. So lots of container plantings enable me to grow things and get a layering effect I couldn't get in the garden beds alone. The other reason I use so many pots is they fill voids. So for example, when the tulips go out of bloom, or the peonies are finished, or the roses are done, I can plop a pot, whether an evergreen or one with seasonal color, for example, those New Guinea impatiens in the distance there, I can plop that into the flower bed without planting them and disturbing the existing plantings and inject a spot of color. It's especially helpful if I entertain, or the sun has changed and things that were in one area are now getting too much sun and they need to be moved to an area that's not quite so harsh. I also do it because in many cases in my mature garden, underneath the canopy of things like this Chinese snowball viburnum, it's too root dense. The roots are too intensive to even be able to dig into the soil. And I also don't want to do that because I might harm the plant itself. This way I can have things growing under the canopy of large plants without actually digging into the soil. The added bonus is that when I put a pot into the flower bed, let me rotate over here. In some cases, not only does it infuse color or greenery, but it injects height. So you can see that boxwood there in front of this arborvitae that I've got pruned up. It looks almost as if it's in the ground, but no, it is in a pot, in a very tall, weatherproof fiberglass pot. And so that's a way I can inject height artificially without planting a very large root ball into the ground itself. Another question is about this lattice that I have hanging on the fence. This is just common lattice, and I make it look more impressive by putting spacers, just blocks of wood as spacers between the fence and the lattice. That does a couple of things. It creates dimension, and also if I am growing something on it, it allows airflow behind the lattice itself and space for climbers, for vines, for clematis, whatever you want to grow on it, to be able to weave in and out of the lattice panels. And then secondarily, on the corners, I can put finials. And that makes it look almost as if it is, let me back up, almost as if it is a frame that I have hung onto the fence itself. Now, this side I have not stained, because it has already aged beautifully. It would be very difficult to stain this fence and the lattice behind all these mature plantings, and I like this silvery facade of it and the kind of mossy green that has started to grow on it. Versus over here on this south-facing fence, it's so dark back in there, maybe you can't even see it, but there is a lattice panel in which I grow a rose and some other things. It's almost completely obscured, but that one I did stain. Let me get out of this light. You can see a hint of it in the background. That is stained because it is near the short fence that goes into the potager. That is also stained. And I wanted, bless you, and I wanted it to harmonize. Look at that pretty sun after all the rain. Look at that pretty sun cascading down on the very shaggy boxwood in the potager. But I wanted it to harmonize and speak to this dark color on the short fence. So the next question is, what color is that short fence? I get that all the time. Well, if you are following me on Instagram, and if you're not, I'm at Potager Blog, Potagerblog. Go to Potager Blog, and in my highlights on my stories under garden, you will, if you go back into time, scroll through the images, you will see the lid of a paint can, and it's got the exact formula on it. Now I will also try on LVTV, I will also try, excuse me, to put the formula under products and resources again, so you'll have that. One advantage to LVTV is that all of these videos and everything that I've done over time are going to be eventually all organized, and you will be able to find all of the various topiary pruning, boxwood pruning, any kind of reference you want. You'll be able to find that on LVTV. So that will be, I think, that will be a helpful resource to you. I'm going to do a video and also show you a fun video of a time lapse of the brick patio in the bistro being put into place. But many of you have asked if I have any kind of subsurface underneath the brick that surrounds the border, and I do not. It is just basically set into the dirt. Some of the soil was excavated out, and then gravel was put on top and falls into the crevices. Those are white wedding hydrangeas there. My favorite question of the week, and I'm sorry I can't remember who asked, or I would give you a shout out, was, do I do these walkabouts in my PJs, or do I have my clothes on, or whatever? And I would say both. This morning I'm in my PJs. One thing about COVID is my mornings are far more languid and far more relaxed than they once were. I don't feel quite the itch to get out real quickly, get up and get going. And because of COVID, in the past, I would have sometimes my friends who would just drop by with guests to show off my garden, but not so much now, for obvious reasons. The trees that surround the perimeter of the dining deck, those are all redbuds. And they all grew from redbud starts. They're eastern redbuds that just grew up into place. And I have just pruned them that way over time to create a canopy. And yes, I do have a very shady garden, but I would say, someone asked, what was my biggest gardening challenge? My biggest gardening challenge is the way the light moves and how the garden is in various light conditions over time. So I would say that that's probably my biggest challenge. Changing light conditions, and the plant's sometimes inability to adapt to changing conditions. I am, you'll be glad to know, going to be introducing more color soon. I'm going to get out once LVTV is launched, and to subscribe, just go to lindawater.tv. Once it's launched, I'm going to start doing a lot more planting projects outside. My garden has been very neglected lately. So there's a lot of answers to your frequently asked questions. And next week, I will actually be back out working in the garden. It needs lots of attention, and I'll have Stuart here to help me. You guys be safe, be well, and happy Friday. I hope that answered some of your questions.